I mean, Andor was something new. It was definitely something different, and that's a good thing. I love Andor, and I recommend to go watch it. If you haven't seen it yet, to go check it out right now. It's worth the watch. You'll enjoy it. You have a good time. Now, Andor is for a more mature audience, and it has a slower burn. The reason I'm glad that it's something new is because I was afraid that we were going to continue getting Disney Star Wars dads, and I was kind of getting tired of seeing it. I was really getting tired of seeing a kid being with an older figure, and Disney making these family made for everyone TV shows and movies. As much as I love Star Wars, I was getting a little bit burnt out on that storyline because it was just the same story being told over and over again. Whereas Andor does mirror Rogue One, but it does so with character driven story. It stretches things out. Now, the theme of Andor is subtlety. This works for it in kind of a bad way, but not by too much. So much so that the show doesn't outright explain exposition to you and more or less shows things that are going on and keeps things, every character is kind of important. The reason this is a problem is because a character that you might meet in episode 1, you won't see again to the last episode, but they still have the same importance and the same value to the narrative structure of the story as a whole. However, because it is more character driven, it leaves for more enriching and focus driven narrative that just pays off in every arc of the show. So much so that the actors give it their all. Every moment is probably, every arc is probably got its own dialogue, monologue, speech to it. There's probably at least 3 or 4, and they are all powerful and impactful. Now, this goes to show even further with, the choreographing hasn't always been the best for Star Wars. There are times where it's really good, but there's a lot of times where the editing is kind of a mess, and I get it. Choreographing is hard to do. However, they make up for it by having every moment be suspenseful. Every time there is an action scene, which there aren't a lot of, they are impactful because they are directly connected to the narrative. They're not there to pass time or to entertain. They're there to tell a story. And I think that's what action scenes are supposed to do. They're supposed to express emotions that cannot be told through just dialogue. And Andor does that perfectly. And because this is more of a slow burn, they have a little bit more fun with their cinematography, the camera work. Something that I normally don't really talk about, but again, subtlety by just cropping out or cutting out characters that could normally be talking in the same scene, give the small feeling of isolation or giving what the character might be feeling emotionally at the time. This it goes a long way to the whole theme of the show because there are other narratives that we follow, and having just these small little things that happen here or there with the cameras or how the characters interact with one another go a very long way in the grand scheme of the show, and which is why I definitely recommend it, but I'm going to be moving into spoiler territory here. That's been kind of the good and the bad of the show, and it's probably better to watch if you binge everything, so you're probably better off lucky that way. But moving into spoilers, this show has something that we don't really see too often, and it's that using characters' deaths during the show. You see a lot of times in movies and things like that characters died off screen, or characters have died, or they've been motivated by death. Or let's compare it to Game of Thrones, where character deaths happen often, probably as often as they do in Andor. The difference between that is Game of Thrones uses it to show what a character did wrong. So that you shouldn't do this or else you will die. Andor flips the script and teaches its lessons through the deaths, meaning in order to push forward, you have to be willing to give your life. And because we see a lot of side characters that are given the spotlight, because of that slow burn that's been portrayed throughout the whole show, we are able to experience their death in a much more meaningful way. Now, I'm going to compare Andor to Rogue One. And look, if you've watched my streams and you've kept up with, kind of the content that I make, you probably know I'm not the biggest fan of Rogue One. So much so that I wasn't that entirely excited for Andor to come out. I'm gonna come out to the new viewers. I gotta let you guys know that. I think Rogue One has a good story. I think it's great, but it's always fallen off because it relies a lot on the characters and the people fighting for the war, and I never felt like I got attached to it. Whereas in Andor, it's able to take those same qualities from Rogue One and expand upon them. Like I said before, this is a character driven narrative, and it works so well here because these are just normal people that are being radicalized by their society or being pushed onto them. The Empire is squeezing too tightly and forcing them to rebel because they don't really have any other option. And choosing to die for a tomorrow that they will never see is really beautiful and is captured, I think, a lot better in Andor. Like, for example, something that you notice a lot in Andor is he's climbing, or he's being told to climb, and in every three arc he is pushing and having to literally grow himself. I can see this, and I could be reaching from exactly like the third act of Rogue One, where they have to climb and grow, and Juno has to grow into the person that she needs to become. However, whenever she sees the the Death Star plans and their name Stardust after what her father was called, I don't get that same feeling as whenever Maeve is giving her speech to her hometown and they're using their equivalent of a tombstone, her tombstone, to smack an Imperial officer because we know how much that means to her. And we've seen her go from being alive to being dead and the consequences of her death and the actions that push forward. And this is why I believe Andor is so powerful and so great at what it's been doing, because even though I am talking mainly about the protagonists, we even have the situations where there are two characters being mirrored, but radicalized differently, where Andor is going to be more of a rebel and he has to learn that he has to have something to fight for, just kind of like how Juno was in Rogue One. They take the same path. They're both selfish, just kind of looking out for themselves, trying to protect themselves. And then they learn that, there's more to fighting than just for yourself. But we see it unravel, probably because we have more time with Andor. It feels better, but also with that security officer that tried to arrest him in the very early episodes, the very first arc of the season. And you see how he becomes more radicalized, but he's going on the same journey Andor is, but he's accepted the Empire. He's accepted the Dominion or the oppression that's happening to him. We get to see what it looks like when that kind of stuff splits and why we might be reason with him. We still see him as kind of an antagonist, but you can get an understanding and you see how these are all just people. And I think this show works even better that there is no space wizards in it. I mean, this show is actually borderline, you take out Star Wars from the label, it would pass as a sci-fi film. And honestly, if Star Wars wasn't in the label, there would probably be sex and drugs and a bunch of other things in it, cursing, and most of that stuff was in there, but it was toned down to PG. So, hey, I really like the change of pace. I think this is good. I was worried for Star Wars, and I'm really glad that we have this. I believe Andor is definitely like a 9 and 10. It's up there. I think it does really good. I do think that the subtlety of it all can be a bit too much, but it's kind of what works the best. It's the strongest thing about this. There's not much to really complain and what hurt this show other than, it's definitely for a more mature audience, but it's played out in a PG-13 way, but I think they make it pass. Also, I'm just now thinking about this, the set design. They didn't really use the volume in this show, and as much as I love the volume and I think that technology should continue pushing forward, I loved how they added so much detail in the set, and that just watching people walk back and forth commuting to work made the world feel more alive. So Tell me your thoughts. Did you enjoy Andor? What was something that you really took from it? And if you hated it, yeah, let's talk about it. Let's go back and forth on it in the comment section below. But if you're enjoying these videos, subscribe. I'm enjoying making them. I want to keep doing them. I'll have them come out every Monday, Sunday for you guys. And I said that backwards. And like the video, it helps out a lot. Until next time, guys, play nice.